AskReddit by Prof XDR. Europeans of Reddit, what do Americans have every day that you see as a luxury? Disability access everywhere. I can go to any place, theater, store, office, school, whatever, with confidence that I'll be able to navigate fine in my wheelchair. They'll have ramps and or elevators. Of all the things in this thread, the disability access is epitome. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 was an absolute game changer, and European countries and the EU as a whole should be embarrassed for not having something like it. Space. America is fucking enormous. Once, on Tumblr, there was a post that went around talking about the differences between American horror stories and European horror stories, and how a lot of European horror stories have a fundamental element of something being very, very old. This led to a discussion about how America has no places like that, which is completely incorrect considering we have very old indigenous communities and structures spanning from Canada to the southernmost tip of South America, but still. And someone made the distinction between the two horror styles that you see a lot. Europe is scary because it's old. The United States is scary because it's huge. Just truly vast expanses of land, a lot of it fairly empty. As someone who has taken greyhounds from the Great Plains to the East Coast many times, it really hits you when you're driving through the Midwest and there's just nothing at all beyond farmland. The massive houses, a special room just for your massive washer and dryer units, 2-car garage. Basically you have tons of space. The dryer alone is a big one. Big kitchens and big refrigerators, freezers. Even in my student apartment we had a pretty good sized kitchen. I was dating a Czech girl and her parents came to visit. When they went to my apartment for a dinner, the mom was just amazed at the size of my fridge. They were amused when I dumped the scraps in the sink and turned on the garbage disposal. They'd heard about it but had never seen one. The Czechs call it in America ledness, which means an American fridge, and when you look at Czech appliance stores that's how they advertise large 2-door refrigerators. They also have American potatoes, but I haven't figured out why they call them that. The size of your homes in places like Utah and Texas. There's a dedicated room for everything. Kids' playroom that isn't the living room or the kids' bedroom, walk-in pantry room, a laundry room. I'm from Texas, but lived in Amsterdam a couple of years. My closet in my Texas house is bigger than a couple of the bedrooms in the place we lived in the NL. Space, room, land. One of my favorite drives is straight across Texas on I-10 from east to west. Eventually you reach a point where you can see the horizon in every direction. I've driven through similar areas in New Mexico. It gives you a feeling of freedom, of openness and space. Makes me wish I could take off on a horse in any given direction and ride for days, but sadly those days are over. Still nice to drive, though. Backyards. I'd plant so many vegetables. Not to brag, but I've spent the last year converting my 1/3-acre to a macro farm peach orchard, all largely funded by the agricultural department. Free refills. While traveling with a friend, he was determined to get a refill at a restaurant while we were getting lunch. He also didn't speak Spanish and thought he could smile and get his way. He took his cup to the register, placed it in front of the employee and smiled. The employee had a confused look, but proceeded to take his cup and then toss in it the trash for him. Extensive national parks. What's badass is if you are permanently disabled, it's free. It is like a really nice consolation prize for a shitty dice roll in life. Used to be 24-hour stores and restaurants. That went away with COVID. I miss the 24-hour Walmarts. The only places we have 24 hours now in my town is McDonald's, Whataburger, and Waffle House. The backyards and front yards. The size of the garages. The huge living rooms. I love watching British real estate shows where they're touring a house and they're like, wow, look at the size of the garden, and it's a postage stamp with a little shack at the back corner and a 4-foot fence on either side separating it from your neighbor's postage stamps. Air conditioning. Americans pump it all summer long. Our AC went out for a day in Phoenix in the middle of July when it was 120 out. House was 90 by 11 am. Fuck that, haha. Arizona actually has laws for tenants that require AC depending on the temperature since it can get so hot. I'm a Canadian who just returned from a trip visiting Grand Canyon, Zion, and Vegas. Our last few trips were in Europe. As mentioned elsewhere, drink refills and plentiful bathrooms clean too were a nice change. The American National Parks system just blows all others out of the water, including Canada's. I'm especially embarrassed about BC's provincial parks. People love to complain that tourists are gross, but the American parks were just as busy but actually had maintained facilities and people who, you know, work to maintain the parks. I didn't see any TP on any of the trails in the US. Meanwhile, I have PTSD from Garibaldi trails last summer. The American Southwest is absolutely ridiculous as far as natural beauty is concerned. Bryce, Arches, Zion, and Grand Canyon NPs are all super close together and are individually worth making a trip for. All types of climate and natural wonders in one country. You like mountains? Go west. Beaches? Most important cities are seaside. Like cold regions? We bow Alaska from Russians some time ago. Desert? Got you covered. Canyons, waterfalls, geysers, forests, all in one country speaking one language using one currency. I replied this elsewhere, but it's amazing to me that there are also such large cities in each biome too. It's not just focused on the coasts. Chicago, Dallas, and Phoenix are top 10 cities by population and none of them are on the coast of an ocean. Chicago is on a massive lake though. Spacious hallways, corridors and homes in general. Dedicated laundry rooms, not a washing machine in the kitchen. I dream of having a dedicated laundry room. My washer and dryer are in the garage next to my hot water heater. The two most peaceful neighbors ever. Remember, the world's longest undefended border is between Canada and the United States. That says something about our relationship. The space. Free use of bathrooms. I loved the Netherlands when I went, but this was the thing I had the hardest time with. Even finding a place to go sometimes was difficult. A few times I'd find myself buying a beer at a bar to feel less guilty about using theirs, or just finding the nearest train station and pay the 50 cents or whatever. The metal piss curls in Amsterdam were a lifesaver. Free refills at restaurants. Handicap accessibility. I required the use of a wheelchair for a few years. During that time, we visited Spain and Italy. It was an absolute nightmare trying to navigate public spaces. My husband made sure that our apartment in Rome had an elevator as it was on the 3rd floor. However, when we arrived, we discovered that there was 2 flights of stairs in order to access the elevator. We managed, but it was a very difficult trip for us. Winter fresh chewing gum. Haven't found a gum as good anywhere else. Houses and lawn space are ridiculously big. Like pointlessly big. I actually have a theory that that's why they all speak so loud. It's because they have to shout across 2 or 3 rooms by default. We've been in this larger home for a few years, and I'm still amazed that I often get 10,000 plus steps a day without ever leaving the house. The sport facilities in high school movies. 10 things I hate about you for example. It must be amazing and super cozy to play in those places with the whole school cheering on a Friday night. Kissing the cheerleader after scoring a touchdown. In Europe you play on some shitty random soccer field with a random team in front of 7 parents and 1 alcoholic. No connection to anything or any money invested in anything unless you play for the best team in the city. But by then we are talking about the biggest teams that you see in Champions League. Europa League and other European tournaments. And that's 15 years old who plays for those teams. I live where that movie was filmed. The school is called Stadium High School. They do screenings of that movie, and people come out and lay on the field to watch. It's actually really cool. Definitely one of the coolest HS stadiums in the US for sure. American here visiting Germany right now. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say fuel cost. The station down the road here sell petrol for 1.75 euro liter. That's about $7.20 gallon if my math is correct. For comparison, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona and just paid $2.85 per gallon last week, which is about 0.75 euro liter. Gas is even cheaper than that in the Midwest us. I'm Canadian, so we have a lot in common with the US in terms of nature and appliances and AC and many other things on this list, but one thing I'm always jealous of the US for is gas. It's so much more expensive here, which is ridiculous because Canada produces a ton of oil, but that's another conversation. Wawa. My American husband always went on about it how he'd love to just drive to Wawa. I never got it until we spent Thanksgiving with his parents. Bring Wawa to the UK please. Air conditioners. It's hot here in Spain. Edit. I'm referring the type of AC that is like whole house AC. I have a window AC and yeah, everyone has those. But I haven't seen many centralized AC units where I am. Should have been more specific, sorry.